I originally wrote the book of French canal routes to the Mediterranean back in 2005, when I'd already used the canals about half a dozen times to get my boats to and from the Mediterranean, and on one occasion to deliver someone else's via the Canal du Midi to Split in the Adriatic. And this video is about my totally revised brand new 12th edition. The first edition was written when I was living in La Rochelle, and I'd just built a website rather imaginatively called michaelbrandt.com, and I needed to do something with it, and found, much to my surprise, that there was not a single pilot-type book about the French canals available at that time. So I sat down and wrote one. Since then, French Canal Routes to the Mediterranean has sold considerably more than 3,000 copies. My experience at that stage had been taking my long keel Elizabethan 31 from Amsterdam down the Dutch canals to Maastricht, and then southwards through the Ardèche to near the head of the River Saône, and then down the Rhône and down to Port Saint Louis. Port Napoleon, the big marina and boatyard, didn't exist back in 1993. My next sortie into the canals involved my delivering a Moody 33 for somebody from Bordeaux at the start of the Canal du Midi to Split in the Adriatic. Then I delivered a Contessa 26 from Cherbourg to Le Havre, through Paris, down the Seine into the canals, where I joined the Saône and the Rhône down to the Mediterranean. My first experience of this, the most popular route through France. I had intended crossing the Atlantic in my steel-built 40-foot Golden Hind, which I sailed from South Dock Marina down to the Canaries. But when I got there, I decided she was just too slow and heavy to go round the world in. So I took her to Sète in the south of France, and then motored her up the Rhône and the Saône into the canals and back to the UK, where I sold her. I purchased then a Moody 36, which I sailed down to Le Havre, then to Paris through the canals to the Mediterranean, where I cruised in her for around 4 years between directing jobs. Then I got bored and I sailed her across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, where I spent several years between jobs before heading out into the Pacific and eventually around the world, being attacked and robbed by Somalian pirates on the way. But that's another video if you're interested on this YouTube site. More recently, I took a Prout 33 catamaran down the canals from Saint-Valery-sur-Somme to the Med, and then later sailed her back up the Canal du Midi to La Rochelle. Whilst having sailed directly across Biscay to the Med around a dozen times, I confess I've always enjoyed the canals experience enormously, and found them a preferable route if heading to the southern Med places like France, Sicily, Turkey or Tunisia, or the Adriatic ports like Corfu. I must say the Orca problems, which have arisen in the approaches to the Straits of Gibraltar and indeed along the Spanish coast, didn't exist then, although I did pass one or two going in the other direction to me. I just kept very quiet, slowed down and waited till they were out of sight. I'm not sure that works for the current bunch, so the canals are an even more attractive route for getting your boat down to the Med. Anyway, back to the brand new version of the book. The very first edition was published only in hardback form, and I used to print about 100 or 150 copies at a time and post them to customers in my home in La Rochelle. Every morning I'd go down to the local post office with an armful of padded envelopes and buy stamps for them. As you can see, this early edition has got no pictures in it and is a very simple format with just a few hand-drawn charts. Today I've published this 12th edition of French Canal Routes to the Mediterranean, which runs to some 20,000 words and has charts, photographs and detailed information about where and how to get the mast down, all the routes from the English Channel, for example via Calais, which is a good option if you don't want a long channel crossing, Saint-Valery-sur-Somme, which is tidal but easy to do if you come from Dieppe, which in turn is very accessible if you're coming from Brighton or Newhaven, and Le Havre, which takes you up the River Seine through Paris and into the canals. There are over 100 pages. I've spent the last month totally updating this 12th edition, and I feel really proud of it. It's like all my books, they're only available from my books library website, which is called gentlesailing.com. There are about 15 books available on that site. French Canal Routes to the Mediterranean is in digital PDF form, but if you want a hardback version, there's an excellent company you can send the PDF file to, and they're called Torfx. And they will make a PDF file into a hard copy book for a few pounds, depending on whether you want it in black and white or colour. There's a link and details on my webpage. I confess, I'm really pleased with this 12th edition, and the fact that it's up to date as a 2023 publication can be. It's even had an editor to correct my appalling grammar and spelling, so it should be easy to read. Ziggy did a brilliant job. She normally works for Italian doctors translating their papers into English, but has enjoyed the occasional sailing trip with me, if mainly from the hammock. It's been a real labour of love, and if you're thinking of avoiding the Orcas and going down the gentle waters of the French canals this summer, then I think you'll find this book helpful. Well, I really hope so. It really is a truly delightful way to get from the UK to the Mediterranean in your own boat. The French Canal Routes to the Mediterranean. My library of digital sailing books is at gentlesailing.com, so you can buy them as instant downloads. There's a link to a printer who can convert them to hard copy if that's what you prefer. I've just totally updated and republished French Canal Routes to the Mediterranean, which is now in its 12th edition and is fully up to date with new information, charts and pictures. Recently I published Your Boat in the Sun, which proved an instant popular success. It's about where to keep your boat in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean and the costs and the logistics involved. I sold 50 copies on the very first day. The Atlantic Crossing Guide has become a bestseller, and it outsells most of the others, probably because it's arguably one of the most comprehensive guides to sailing to the Caribbean that's available. The Gentle Sailing Route to the Mediterranean is one of the most popular publications that I have. It describes how to coast hop all the way to Gibraltar without having to spend a night at sea. There are books about marinas in the Med, sailing in the Caribbean islands, as well as a book on simple navigation and even a Pacific Ocean crossing guide, and a book about just living aboard a sailing boat. Anyway, it's all at gentlesailing.com, so please do pay the site a visit and browse through my publications if you have a moment. Thanks. Fair winds.